Last spring, I tried something that most gardeners would consider completely ridiculous. Every time I ate a banana, and I eat a lot of bananas, instead of throwing the peel in the compost or the bin, I dropped it into a large jar of water sitting on my kitchen counter. After 3 or 4 peels had been soaking for about 48 hours, I took that jar out to the garden and watered my tomatoes with it. Every single week, from transplanting in May all the way through to the final harvest in October. I kept detailed notes. I photographed the plants every week. I grew the same variety, Gardener's Delight, in identical conditions right next to each other. One bed got the banana water every week. The other bed got plain tap water. Everything else was identical. Same soil, same compost, same spacing, same watering frequency. The results surprised me. Not just a little, a lot. And today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened, why it happened, and how you can replicate this experiment in your own garden this season. Before I get into what happened, I want to explain why banana water is even worth talking about. Because when I first heard about this, my reaction was skepticism. It sounds like folk remedy nonsense. So let me give you the actual science. Bananas are one of the most potassium-rich foods available. A single medium banana contains approximately 422 milligrams of potassium. But what most people don't realize is that the majority of that potassium, roughly 40% of the total potassium in the whole banana, is concentrated in the peel, not the fruit. The part we eat contains potassium. The part we throw away contains even more of it. When banana peels are submerged in water and left to soak, potassium and other water-soluble minerals leach out of the peel and into the surrounding water. This process takes between 24 and 72 hours and produces a dilute liquid fertilizer that is meaningfully rich in potassium, along with smaller amounts of phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and manganese. Now, why does potassium matter specifically for tomatoes? This is the key question. And the answer is fundamental to understanding why this experiment produced the results it did. Potassium plays several critical roles in plant physiology. First, it regulates the opening and closing of stomata, the tiny pores in leaves through which plants exchange gases and water. Adequate potassium means better water regulation, better drought tolerance, and more efficient photosynthesis. Second, potassium is essential for the movement of sugars from the leaves where they're produced to the fruits where they're stored. Without sufficient potassium, a tomato plant can be producing sugar in its leaves but failing to move that sugar into developing fruits. The result is reduced fruit size, reduced sweetness, and uneven ripening. Third, potassium strengthens cell walls throughout the plant, making it more resistant to disease, pest damage, and environmental stress. Potassium-deficient tomatoes are more susceptible to blossom end rot, cracking, and fungal diseases. And here's the critical context. Tomatoes are extremely heavy potassium feeders. They are one of the most potassium-demanding crops in the entire vegetable garden. As tomatoes move into flowering and fruiting, which is when potassium demand peaks dramatically, many home garden soils simply cannot supply enough potassium to meet that demand. This is why commercial tomato fertilizers are almost always very high in potassium. Banana water, applied weekly during this critical period, provides a consistent, low-level supply of potassium directly at the root zone. The question my experiment was designed to answer was simple. Is it enough to make a measurable difference? Let me walk you through exactly how I set up the experiment because I want you to be able to replicate it precisely if you want to test this yourself. I prepared 2 identical raised beds, each measuring 4 feet by 8 feet. Both beds were filled with the same mix. 2 parts garden compost to 1 part topsoil to 1 part perlite, mixed thoroughly. Both beds received exactly the same amount of base fertilizer before planting. 1 application of balanced granular fertilizer worked into the top 4 inches of soil. I planted 6 Gardener's Delight cherry tomato plants in each bed, spacing them identically at 18 inches apart in 2 rows. All 12 plants came from the same seed packet, were started at the same time, in the same compost, under the same grow lights, and were transplanted on the same day, at the same stage of development. The only variable was the water. Bed A, the control bed, received plain tap water, left to stand overnight to allow chlorine to dissipate. Bed B, the test bed, received the same volume of water, but with banana peel extract added. The banana water preparation was consistent throughout the experiment. Every Monday morning, I placed 3 banana peels into a 1-liter glass jar, filled it with tap water, and left it on the kitchen counter for exactly 48 hours. On Wednesday morning, I removed the peels, diluted the jar contents with 3 additional liters of plain water, giving me a total of 4 liters of diluted banana water, and applied it evenly across the root zone of all 6 plants in bed B. Bed A received 4 liters of plain tap water at the same time. Both beds received no additional fertilizer of any kind for the entire duration of the experiment. No liquid feeds, no top dressings, no foliar sprays, just water, either plain or banana infused. I measured and recorded the following every week: plant height, number of flower trusses, number of fruits set, first ripe fruit date, total fruit count at harvest, and average fruit weight. I also photographed both beds from the same position every 7 days, weeks 1 through 4. The early vegetative phase, and I want to be completely honest with you, during this period I saw almost nothing, no visible difference between the 2 beds whatsoever. Both beds grew at essentially the same rate. Both developed healthy dark green foliage. Both began producing their first flower trusses at approximately the same time, around the end of week 3. If I hadn't been keeping detailed measurements, I would have assumed the banana water was doing absolutely nothing. This is actually what I expected. Potassium doesn't dramatically affect vegetative growth the way nitrogen does. Nitrogen drives leafy growth, big green leaves, rapid upward extension, lush canopy. Potassium works more quietly, building the infrastructure that will matter later. Strong cell walls, efficient water regulation, good root development. None of these show up, obviously, in a visual inspection of the plants. The one thing I did notice during weeks 2 and 3 was that the root systems of the banana water plants appeared slightly more developed when I checked the drainage holes at the bottom of the raised beds after watering. More roots reaching the drainage holes, and they appeared thicker and more white, indicating active, healthy growth, compared to the control bed plants. But honestly, if this had been the whole story, if weeks 1 through 4 had been representative of the entire experiment, I would have concluded that banana water makes no meaningful difference and moved on. What happened from week 5 onward is what changed my mind entirely. Week 5 was when things got interesting. Both beds began flowering heavily at the same time, which was expected since both sets of plants were the same age and variety. But over the following 2 weeks, a clear difference in fruit set began to emerge. Fruit set, the process by which a pollinated flower develops into a small green tomato, is one of the most potassium-dependent processes in the entire growing cycle. This is the moment when all that potassium infrastructure built up over the previous weeks either pays off or doesn't. By the end of week 6, I counted the small developing fruits on both beds. Bed A, the control, had 47 developing fruits across 6 plants. Bed B, the banana water bed, had 61 developing fruits across the same number of plants. That's a 30% higher fruit set rate. Now, I want to be careful about how I interpret this. A higher fruit set doesn't automatically mean a higher final harvest. Tomato plants naturally abort a significant proportion of developing fruits, especially under stress conditions. What matters is how many of those developing fruits ultimately reach full size and ripen. But the difference in fruit set was striking enough that I started paying much closer attention. Week 7 brought another observable difference. The foliage on the banana water plants began showing a noticeably deeper, richer green color compared to the control plants. This wasn't a dramatic difference. Someone walking past might not notice, but in my weekly photographs it was clearly visible. Potassium plays a role in chlorophyll function, and adequate potassium levels are associated with more intense leaf color in many plants. By week 8, I could also see a difference in the overall vigor and density of the banana water plants. They appeared slightly more robust, thicker stems, more lateral branching, denser foliage cover. The control plants were healthy and growing normally, but by comparison they looked slightly less substantial. This is the section I've been building toward, because the ripening and harvest phase is where banana water either proves or fails to prove its value, and this is where the results became genuinely difficult to ignore. Week 9. Both beds had large numbers of developing fruits at various stages. The banana water bed had more fruits overall, consistent with the higher fruit set rate from week 6. But now a new difference was becoming visible. The tomatoes on the banana water plants were beginning to show color, turning from green to orange to red, approximately 5 to 7 days earlier than the corresponding fruits on the control plants. Early ripening in tomatoes is strongly associated with potassium availability during the ripening phase. Potassium is directly involved in the synthesis of lycopene, the red pigment in tomatoes, and in the conversion of starches to sugars that makes a ripe tomato sweet rather than bland. I harvested the first ripe tomato from bed B on day 68 after transplanting. The first ripe tomato from bed A came on day 74, a 6-day difference. Now, 6 days might not sound significant, but in a season where you're fighting against the weather, against the first frost, against the end of summer, 6 extra days of ripening time can translate into a meaningfully larger final harvest. Over the following 4 weeks of harvest, I picked every ripe tomato from both beds and weighed them separately. Here are the final numbers. Bed A, the control, produced a total harvest of 2.84 kilograms across 6 plants, an average of 473 grams per plant. Bed B, the banana water, produced a total harvest of 3.71 kilograms across 6 plants, an average of 618 grams per plant. That is a 31% higher total yield from the banana water plants, from the same variety, in the same soil, in the same beds, with the same care, differing only in weekly banana water applications. I also assessed flavor. I brought in 5 people who didn't know which tomatoes came from which bed and asked them to taste samples from both and give a preference. 4 out of 5 preferred the banana water tomatoes, describing them as sweeter and more intensely flavored. One person said they tasted identical. Let me explain why these results make sense scientifically, because I think understanding the mechanism is more valuable than just accepting the result. The banana water experiment worked in my assessment for 3 interconnected reasons. First, consistent low-level potassium supplementation during the period when tomatoes need it most. Home garden soils are frequently potassium deficient by midsummer after the initial soil preparation has been depleted by early growth. A weekly application of dilute potassium keeps levels in the soil solution stable without ever creating the excess that can lock out other nutrients. Second, the additional minerals in banana water beyond potassium. Calcium from banana peels helps prevent blossom end rot, one of the most common tomato problems in home gardens. Magnesium supports chlorophyll production and is frequently deficient in container and raised bed growing. Manganese plays a role in photosynthesis and root metabolism. Third, and this is the one that surprised me most, the microbiological effect. Banana water contains sugars and organic compounds that feed beneficial soil bacteria and fungi. These microorganisms play critical roles in nutrient cycling, making nutrients in the soil more available to plant roots. By feeding the soil biology weekly, the banana water may have been improving the overall nutrient availability in bed B beyond just the direct potassium contribution. I want to be honest about the limitations of this experiment. This was one season, in one garden, with one variety. The result, 31% higher yield, is compelling, but it's not a controlled scientific study with replication across multiple sites and seasons. It's the kind of result that warrants further experimentation, not the kind that should be stated as a proven universal fact. What I can say with confidence is this: the result was consistent with what the science of potassium in tomato nutrition would predict. The mechanism is plausible, and the cost and effort involved in testing it yourself is essentially zero. Here is exactly how to replicate what I did, the precise method, the timing, and the things I'd do differently if I were starting again. The basic method: every time you eat a banana, put the peel in a large glass jar or container with a lid. Once you have 2 to 4 peels, fill the container with water, roughly 1 liter per peel. Leave it at room temperature for 48 to 72 hours. The water will turn yellowish-brown and may develop a slightly fermented smell. This is normal and desirable. After 48 to 72 hours, remove and compost the peels. Dilute the liquid with an equal volume of plain water. So if you made 1 liter of banana water, add 1 liter of plain water to give you 2 liters of diluted solution. Apply this directly to the soil around the root zone of your tomatoes. Do not spray it on the leaves. Timing: begin banana water applications 2 weeks after transplanting your tomatoes into their final growing position. Continue weekly applications through flowering, fruit set, and ripening. Stop applications about 2 weeks before you expect your final harvest. I found that late-season applications had little measurable effect, and the effort wasn't justified. Frequency: once per week is ideal, less than once a fortnight, and you lose the benefit of consistent supplementation. More than twice a week and you risk over-application. Excessive potassium can interfere with the uptake of calcium and magnesium, potentially causing more problems than it solves. A few things I do differently. In my experiment, I used a 1:3 dilution ratio, 1 part banana water to 3 parts plain water. If I were doing this again, I would use a 1-to-4 ratio, slightly more dilute, because I think there were a few weeks mid-season where the banana water plants showed very slight leaf edge browning that may have been mild potassium excess. Slightly more dilute would be safer. I would also rotate which plants receive banana water and which receive plain water on alternate weeks, rather than the same plants getting banana water every single week, to avoid any potential buildup in the soil. This is probably overcautious, but it's good practice with any regular liquid feed. I want to answer the questions I get most often about banana water because some of them reveal genuine misunderstandings that are worth addressing. Question 1. Can I use banana water on other vegetables besides tomatoes? Yes, absolutely. Any heavy fruiting or flowering crop that has high potassium demands will likely respond positively. Peppers, aubergines, courgettes, cucumbers, squash, strawberries, all are potassium-hungry crops that fruit heavily. Leafy crops like lettuce and spinach are much less potassium-dependent, and you're unlikely to see a meaningful effect. Question 2. Can I use old banana water that's been sitting for more than a week? I would not recommend it. After about 3 days, the liquid begins to ferment more aggressively, and the pH drops significantly. Very acidic water applied repeatedly to your soil can acidify the root zone over time. Fresh banana water, made and used within 72 hours, is far preferable. Question 3. Do I need to use organic bananas? This is a reasonable question. Conventional bananas are treated with fungicides post-harvest, some of which may persist on the peel surface. If you're concerned about this, a quick rinse of the peel before soaking is sufficient. Using organic bananas removes this concern entirely but is not strictly necessary. Question 4. Will banana water attract pests or fruit flies? This is the most common objection I hear, and it's worth addressing seriously. Applied to the soil and not to the leaves or fruit, banana water does not, in my experience, attract meaningful pest activity. The dilute solution soaks into the soil within minutes of application. If you're concerned, apply it in the morning so it can fully absorb before evening when many pests are most active. Let me bring this all together because I think there's a broader point here that goes beyond just banana water. The result of this experiment, a 31% higher yield from weekly banana water applications, is the kind of result that the gardening internet treats with either breathless enthusiasm or dismissive skepticism. Neither reaction is right. The honest position is this: banana water provides a real source of potassium and other minerals. Tomatoes have a genuine documented need for consistent potassium supply during fruiting. The mechanism by which banana water could improve tomato yield is scientifically plausible, and the experiment I ran produced results consistent with that mechanism. Is banana water the most efficient way to deliver potassium to your tomatoes? Probably not. A commercial liquid tomato fertilizer provides a precise, guaranteed potassium level at a known concentration. Banana water is variable. The potassium content depends on how ripe the bananas were, how many peels you used, how long you soaked them, and how you diluted the result. But here is the thing that matters most for a home gardener. Banana water is free. It converts food waste into plant nutrition. It requires no trip to the garden center, no money spent, no plastic bottle to dispose of. And in my experiment, it produced a 31% higher yield compared to doing nothing at all. That's a compelling argument for at least trying it. The cost of failure is zero. The potential upside is a third more tomatoes. Here's what I want you to do. This season, if you're growing tomatoes, try banana water on half your plants and plain water on the other half. Keep notes, count your fruits, weigh your harvest, run your own experiment, because the most useful gardening knowledge isn't what someone on the internet tells you. It's what you discover works in your own soil, in your own garden, in your own conditions. If you do try it, come back and tell me what happened. Leave a comment. I read every single one, and I'm genuinely curious whether others see the same results I did. If this video gave you something useful, hit the like button. It helps more gardeners find this channel. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next video. I'll see you there. Happy growing.